All right, on the Daily Family, we got a really fun guest today. This is Nick Thompson. You might know him from season 2 of Love is Blind. Every time I say that, I want to reverse the is and the of. Like, it's a really hard sentence to say just like that. Anyway, I'm really glad you're here. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me come on.
Yeah, you've been through quite a whirlwind in the last few years of your life, and that's a lot of shifting and changing. And I want everyone to kind of hear like who you are, where you come from, all the things, but then also like what we're talking about today is, which I think everyone can relate to, is how do you stay true to yourself during, huge transitions in your life, huge things that happen, and then like how do you create from those moments? So we're going to get into all that, but tell us, who is Nick Thompson? Where's Nick Thompson at in the world? What's Nick Thompson up to?
So, who is Nick Thompson is actually a domain that I used to own. So it's a question that I think about all the time. So so I a lot of people may know me from Love is Blind, as you mentioned, but that's I like to joke and say that's one of the 5,000 things you should know about me. I currently am a launched a podcast that I'm focused on the things that kind of matter to me in this world, which is mental health, self-care, news and politics, but really like being able to foster open conversations about these things because we have a lot of stigmas and we have a lot of divides in the world and a lot of judgment. And I think
Mm.
the real passion of mine is always bringing people together and realizing that we're all human beings. So, being able to foster that kind of conversation is, soothes my soul a little bit. I will be open and transparent. I recently was laid off from my marketing tech job. So I'm doing a little bit of marketing consulting on the side right now. If anyone out there needs that, reach out to me. And then, personally, I'm a kid that grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in a working class family. And I went to, grew up with a Catholic family and went to a Catholic school and surviving through all of that and all the transitions of becoming a kid and or growing up from being a kid and suburbs of Chicago. And now I currently live in Chicago, and I'm trying to put my best foot forward and be the best version of myself that I can.
I love that you said, I really like talking about like, we're all human beings, because that's like
Mm-hmm.
something that we talk about a lot on this show. Like it's that human being versus like human doing. And I think it's so easy for us to get into these routines and these like, to follow along with the boxes that people have put us in. And I heard a quote a few weeks ago from a healer that I work with. I'm in Austin, Texas. And so I heard a
Nice.
quote from my healer, and he was like, it's to lose your ego is to lose your personality and to drop the personality. And I was like, whoa, shit. Okay. Like
Wow.
basically, like everybody in your life, including yourself, is going to put this like a personality to you. And that stigma that you talk about, right? Like it follows you. And so at what point, when you realize that like maybe the stigma that you're living, or like you kind of have this moment where you're like, actually, this isn't who I am. And actually, I don't want to be like this anymore. Then it's
Mm-hmm.
about like dropping that personality. So I love that you say that when you said you like to talk about news and politics, I was like, ooh, that's a fun topic to talk about these days.
I think I totally agree with you. I love that quote, by the way, too. But the interesting thing about what you said, and I haven't really thought about this, is how much of our personality is projected onto us, and then we just take it as if it is ours.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because obviously, like kind of overnight being recognized.
Yeah, like thrust
There's
into the limelight.
exactly it's exactly it thrusted into it. um there's a lot of people all over the place that put personality traits on me that couldn't be further from the truth. And again, it's all
Mm,
because they watched maybe a maximum of 2 hours of over the
mm-hmm.
course of, I don't even know anymore, like what, 12 weeks
Yeah.
total.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting how people project personality traits on you. And what's more interesting is, do we actually take them on sometimes?
Right. What do you think is the number one like misconception about you right now? If you had to like
I
pick
mean,
one.
I think anybody who this is the one that bothers me the most. It doesn't even really bother me, but people think I gossip. And it's
Mm.
like from the show, like I got labeled a gossip.
Oh yeah, you did
And
kind of get labeled that. I remember that. And I
yeah.
remember thinking like I feel like they all gossip.
Well, the funny thing is like when we were filming the show, I mean, I had a full-time job. Like I'm a marketing like executive for lack
Yeah.
of a better word. So I wasn't talking to anyone from the show during the day and stuff. So when we would go film, I would literally just like be asking them questions to catch up and
Yeah.
be like, so wait a minute, what happened?
So
So
what
wait a
happened
minute,
last week? So you did
yeah,
what?
because I exactly. And of course, like it doesn't really bother me, but it's like there were things that were going on that, you people would say sometimes mic'd, sometimes off camera. And it's editing. You can
Mm.
edit and add anything, remove anything.
Hmm. I
It's
mean,
just
production is
funny.
wild. I grew up like dancing professionally and like, I, I, I grew up in Los Angeles. So in and out of the entertainment industry, I worked in film, I worked in TV. And I think people who don't understand that world really do feel like everything being captured is like raw in the moment and like just like put to background music. And I think it's fascinating because whenever we watch that show at home, I'm always thinking, like I'm always the first one to be like, well, this is how the show wants you to feel about this person, but I'm actually wondering like if that's real. Like I'm always questioning that, and so I always wonder like, do other people question that as well? But most people probably are just like, well, he's the gossiper, you know, and
It's
it's like,
crazy. Yeah,
am I
yeah.
the gossiper? Okay,
Well,
okay.
that's the funny thing too, is like I do ask hard questions. Like I challenge my friends to think differently. I challenge them to think
Mm,
things through. And the thing that was weird about the whole show is like I felt like people weren't really realizing that were like the main cast, like, hey, this is a show. Yes, there's cameras everywhere, but you're going to get a real marriage license, a
right,
very real marriage license
right,
that if you say I do is going to be signed by the minister, and then you are legally married.
married.
And I
Yeah,
didn't, and some of these things that people were doing and saying, I'm like, this is not going to work in a relationship. And I'm no
right,
expert, but like
right,
I've had a lot of relationships,
right.
and it, some of these things you have to figure out
Yeah,
before you get married. And so I just felt
yeah.
like people weren't really taking it seriously all the time. So I just kind of would like
Mm.
ask questions to be like, hey, have you thought of this before? Have you thought of that before? Um,
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
so
this is
yeah, I don't
so
know.
off topic. This is so off topic, but I think you'll laugh. We sit at home and, there's like a stigma with lesbian women and they always say things like they U-Haul and like lesbians fall in love very quickly. And I was like, you want to find out, you want to have a show where everyone gets married and everyone gets engaged in three, like in the first episode. You just have it be a show with all girls and like you just see how fast that show pops off. They're all gonna not make it probably, but like it'll happen real fast. Like,
It'll be like
but
the expedited edition.
oh yeah, like the abridged. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think? Obviously, that's a lot, right? Like, obviously, anybody who follows the show, anybody who follows you, follows your relationship, like they know how it's going, they know how it ended, they know all the things, or at least
Mhm.
they think they know they know what the internet tells them, right? Of course.
Correct.
But what I like, I'm not interested in like what's going on behind closed doors in your relationship because I've been through breakups and it's very personal. And so, what I want to know is personally, what, who were you before? Are you different now? And if so, how?
So who I was before is the person that everybody can see and follow on social media. The person that you meet walking down the streets here in Chicago, or I still get to meet and make so many people's days. Like when people get
Mm-hmm.
excited to just take a picture or say hi, like I get a lot of peace from that. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
nice to just be able to make people smile. But
Mm-hmm.
I am a person who like I started calling these like my values, like my value pillars, but like I spent a lot of time in my teens and 20s trying to figure out like one, in some cases, what was wrong with me. Two, like why do I feel the way that I feel?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I insecure? Why am I so
Mm-hmm.
reactive? Why am I so irritable? Like all of these things to figure out that, hey, like I was unsure of who I was and who I was putting out in the world. So when you feel insecure and unsure about who you are, like that's what you put out in the world. So through therapy, through, just doing my own self-reflection and understanding and, reworking events and thinking about how I could have behaved differently, I've really come to this place where like, I'm like, Nick, like do the right thing. You're a good person. Just do the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
have integrity, and then be intentional, right? And have
Mm-hmm.
good intentions. And so that's kind of who I am. Like I
Mm-hmm.
try to always put my best foot forward. I try to always do the right thing. I say like I'm unapologetically myself because I believe like I'm doing the best I can and I'm acting with integrity. So
Yeah.
that's kind of who I am. And I take that into work. I take that into friendships. I take that into relationships. And I take that, into my other work as well. So,
Mm.
when you see on social media, I just commented on Trump entering the election again.
Oh,
Like,
I saw that. I was like, ooh,
yeah, yeah,
fire.
it's yeah. And but that's the thing is like I can talk to anyone and I can talk about him entering and
Too.
say both sides because like I understand.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's like something that I was texting with my friends about that day. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's not just me trying to, be a political commentator. Same
Stir the
with
pot.
any,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like I share a lot of my self-care stuff, a lot of my DIY stuff
Mm-hmm.
on my Instagram because this is what I do with my time. Like I
Right.
talk about politics, I talk about ideas, I talk about
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing to feel better that day,
Mm-hmm.
or if I'm doing something specifically to feel better that day, or to
Mm-hmm.
help myself or to better myself. Like that's who I am, and that's kind of the way that I like to carry myself. And you can see that through anytime you interact with me in real
Yeah.
life or through digital channels.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, I feel like that is something, how you said, like, I can talk to anybody. Like, I'm the same way. And I don't know if this happens with you. I get so, like people close to me that like I have very, very dear friends on both sides of the political, religious aisles. Like
Mm-hmm.
they could not be more different. And like I am equally as close with both sides. And people are always like, I don't understand. The people on this side
Right.
are like, I don't understand how you're friends with them. And then the people on this side are, I don't understand how you're friends with them. And I've gone through a lot growing up thinking like, am I crazy? Am I the crazy one? Because I just don't understand how we would possibly judge somebody based on like who they're voting for. Like to me, who somebody votes for says nothing about like their character, says nothing about like I don't know everything about. I don't know why they choose to do what they do, like
Mm.
except that that's their choice. And also, I think this whole world of social media, which I'm sure you have a very hot opinion on, given everything that you've been through, but I feel like we shouldn't know everything that we do about people.
No.
And the fact that we do has made it so that everything is either this or it's that. And if you dare be a person who's willing to have conversation, you know, you're looked at as the crazy one. When really, I'm like, I don't know if I'm the crazy one, y'all. Like I feel like I'm the normal one.
Well, I agree with you. And it comes down to, and this was actually the inspiration for my podcast was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're all human beings. So like gentleman or lady on the right or lady or gentleman on the left, take your views, your opinions,
Mm-hmm.
stop and realize just like on the left, they came from something in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are as a human
Mm-hmm.
being leads you to have these beliefs. Well, that
Mm-hmm.
person over here is the same thing,
Yeah.
different experiences, different interpretations, different perspectives.
Yep.
That's both sides. To
Yep.
be in this, to be able to come to the center and say, hey, left, right, religious, unreligious, when we're not hurting anybody, we can have a safe space to have these conversations. I
Right.
want to know where you're coming from and why you're coming from that position.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing with that happened in 2016. Like, I remember talking about this with my friends. I'm like, you
Mhm.
guys, Trump's going to win.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, because like I grew up the way that the people are voting for him.
Mhm.
And the reason they're voting for him is because the jobs are gone. And of
Mhm.
course, there's going to be some racists, like, of course.
Yeah.
But
Right.
a lot of people were voting for him because their job was in China or in Mexico now.
Right.
And that
Right.
happened to my family a lot growing up.
Right. Yeah.
Lost a lot of jobs.
Oh yeah.
So
I
it's,
mean,
yeah,
Chicago, that's like auto, right? That's like the auto industry, that's blue collar. That's like,
mm-hmm.
I grew up in Santa Monica. And so a lot of the people where I grew up are like, "Oh, well, I don't understand that." And it's like, "Well, no, you wouldn't, because your dad was a producer and like worked in Hollywood." Like there's a
So true.
difference. There's a different way of living. And if you're not
Mm-hmm.
willing, and like I moved to London when I was 20 and I lived there for a
That's
few years,
cool.
and then I lived in San Diego, and like I moved all over the place, and I just remember being from a very young age being like we all have different experiences, and even the experiences that we have that we think are the truth are really just like that's just our the
Perception.
color. Yeah, that's just our perception of the, you know what it is. Here's how I explain like the world. Like if you and I remember that game we played as kids. How old are you in your 30s? Are we this?
37. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm 35, so like we
We're
are
the
gonna
same.
understand this. So you know that game we always used to have to play where like you would flip up the like color pinwheel thing, and then like you'd have to go underneath it, and it was like a parachute with all these different
Oh,
colors on it.
yeah, 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 yeah. The
Yeah,
parachute.
every
Yeah.
square is a different color. And so you'd go under it and it would land on you. And like if I'm sitting under the blue square now, everything I perceive around me is kind of blue tinted, and like
Blue.
my reality of it is blue. And I in my brain, everybody else is having this same experience, but you're sitting under the red square or the yellow square or the orange square, and you're perceiving that everything is kind of orange, and also assuming that everybody's having that same experience. But at the end of the day, none of us are having that experience, nor are we actually having the experience that we think we're having, because we're really just sitting underneath a blue and an orange square. And like that's the world.
That's true.
And that's
That's a
it. You
very,
and
very
I,
good way to
we're going to
put it.
run for president.
There we go.
Thompson McCleary, 2024.
Hey, there was actually like a whole bunch of people that DM me wanting me to do that.
Oh my gosh. You
That
know
and
what
mayor
job
of
I would
Chicago.
never want? You know what job I would rather eat glass than have? That one.
Yeah, me too. I think.
Okay. So tell me this. Like, have you found it hard over the last few years, given like how in the public eye you are, which were you in the public eye before at all? Like, were you?
The only time I'd ever really been in the public eye was through work. So I would do like
Okay.
speaking engagements. So it's
Okay.
totally different
Totally
experience.
different. Yeah. This is like on a national level. Like people,
Yeah.
like, yeah. So given everything you've been
Global.
through, yeah, global. Yeah. You guys are global now. Yeah. It's crazy. So you guys, like, given everything you've been through and all of the, like, the exposure that you've had, have you found it hard at all to stay true to those values? Those, like, what do you call them? Belief pillars? Is that what you called them?
Value pillars. Yeah.
Value. Yeah. I call them my core values. You call them your pillars. So, like, all of those things, integrity, like communication, being human, like all of those things. Have you found it hard to stick to those at all? Like, was that ever shaken at any point in this process?
Yeah. They I get tested and shaken probably at least every day once, I would say, from a variety of different areas of my life,
Mm-hmm.
publicly, privately, and all of that. And the thing that is weird for me is like I was very secure, very confident, very unapologetically myself, which I
Mm-hmm.
said.
Mm-hmm.
And going into this, I was just kind of like, I know who I am, and I know I've got my value pillars. I just need to stick to those. And if I stick to those, like I'm not going to get manipulated by a production. I'm not going to be shaken by confidence if someone doesn't like me. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
fine if I went home day 2 or 3. I was fine if I met the person that I wanted to marry. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
fine no matter what. It was fine. And then
Mm-hmm.
after that, you're in one pressure cooker to another. So it's like going, being in the pods, leaving the pods. It's like, okay, am I going to get engaged? Are they going to like the way that I look? Am I going to like the way they look?
Right.
Is it going to matter? Like, do
Is
you
it
know
gonna
if it
matter?
matters?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, are we going to get married? And then it's like, well, when does the show come out? Like, how do we make this relationship work? Because, all of a sudden it's just gone. and then it's the show's coming out, right? And then first it's the cast is being announced, then the show's coming out, then it's coming out for 3 weeks, then there's the reunion, and then there's after the altar, and it's like, and then that's coming out. So it's just,
Yeah, you guys had
you're moving from,
a year later. Like they followed you guys for a long time. That's crazy. Yeah, that's
yeah,
crazy.
we did after the altar like almost a year after, like 11 months after. So it's like you're in one pressure cooker and then you move to another one that's a little bit bigger each time.
Yeah.
And so throughout this process, like I found, especially after the show aired,
Mm-hmm.
there is pressure from every which direction to change. And it's
Mm.
not directly like, Nick, you need to do this every time, but it is sometimes. Or, I got advice from, our PR folks at the beginning, to not
Oh.
talk about politics because it was going to
Oh.
be, and so I'm like sitting there and I'm like, okay. And so the pressure, like I talk about it every day. One of my hobbies is listening to podcasts and independent media. Like I
Yeah.
love it. I love talking about it.
Yeah.
And I was told not to talk about it anymore. And I'm like, okay, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt opportunities. I'm like, well, if it's going to hurt opportunities, like maybe those aren't the opportunities for me, and
Right.
secondly, like I've told this story before too, like, you get these brand partnership opportunities that come flying in because this show is pretty big. So
Yeah.
you're,
Huge.
you're a hot commodity
Mm-hmm.
afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
There would be nonstop media, nonstop opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
some of these opportunities that were coming towards me from like brand partnerships and stuff are products I would never use,
Right.
or things that I would never support or buy in my real life.
Right.
But the pressure to sit there and talk about said brand is there because you can make $5, $10, $20,000 just to have a couple posts about it.
Right.
And so it's like there's financial gains there, but then it's like, do you kind of sell out your belief system to make that money?
Yeah.
And the pressure was there, right? All of
Mm-hmm.
that. And then, so there's pressure to change what I think, how I feel, what I talk about. There's pressure to, you know, sling product ads on your social
Yeah.
media. And, to be clear, like I'm not against that. I don't, anyone who does it, like to each their own, that's, that's
Right.
your value system that you implement, and that's fine.
Right.
But for me, it was like, gosh, I'm leaving money on the table. I'm maybe hurting my opportunities in other areas because of the things that I talk about and the things that I care about. And,
Mm.
so it's like the pressure's coming from there. And then you see, other castmates like leaving their jobs and just taking, all of these opportunities. And so there's pressure, like, when are you quitting your job? And then there's pressure from, friends and family to do other opportunities and all of this stuff. And so the
Yeah.
pressure is just coming from a lot of different directions and a lot of different forums. And staying true to myself meant leaving money on the table. It meant, um, leaving different opportunities out there
Yeah.
that, you know, may or may not present themselves again. But
Right.
at the end of the day, like, I know that I'm doing what's best for me, because when I step out of my character, which, I didn't know what it was before in my 20s and stuff. So I did it a lot. When I
Mm-hmm.
step out of my character, like I'm uncomfortable. I get depressed. I feel gross.
Mm-hmm.
There's times where even now I'll slip up and I'll like say something that like, I probably wish I would have thought that through.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the pressure, though. It's everywhere. It's,
Mm-hmm.
do talk about this, don't talk about this, do take this, don't take that. Like it's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and if you're a person who does stick to their values and does not bend for, you know, even Netflix, even somebody as big and bad as Netflix, right? Like it, then you're kind of looked at as like the black sheep a little bit, I bet. And like that was you were when you were talking about that, it reminded me so much like when I was working in television and I was, dancing, and I went to school for theater. I got a master's in acting. I was like, I wanted to be an actor. Like, and then you find yourself like getting auditions for Tide commercials. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck about Tide. I would
Yeah.
never wash my
Yeah.
clothes in Tide. Like, it's never going to happen. Like, or you're being asked to, like, you're getting these auditions for like vape pens. I'm like, I've never smoked a cigarette a day in my life. Like, you think I'm going to go be on but
Yep.
it's $30,000. I don't give a shit. And people
Yep.
just like don't know I feel like a lot of people don't know what to do with a person like that. They're kind of like,
No, they don't. And
oh,
that's a lot of the stuff that people say to me on the internet are faithful keyboard hate warriors.
we
Or
love
I
them.
actually have been calling them the online lynch mob now.
Ah, even
But
better. They probably love that.
yeah, I've come to realize, and I'm glad you said this, and this is just recently, I don't think people know what to do with someone who's authentic, like, and has these like core values.
Like,
So
wait, you didn't
people, I
just want to
mean,
go on that show to get famous? Weird.
I
That's
literally am
actually not who
probably,
you are. Weird. And then you see people melt down because now they don't know what to do with you.
that's exactly it. And a lot of people that are like, oh, Nick's hiding something. Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
hiding anything. I'm actually just like this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
quirky.
Mm-hmm.
I love scary movies. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I dress up
Mm-hmm.
as Michael Myers for Halloween. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I make a lot of my own stuff, and now
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sharing it on social. Like, I just
Yeah.
am this way. I'm a little quirky.
Yeah.
No matter where you meet me and what form you meet me, like, I'm going to be the same. That's
Yeah.
just who I am. And I don't think people know what to do with that. They do
Yeah.
think, oh, you went on to be famous. Or the funny one that I get is like, people are like, oh, he went on to make money on this podcast. And it's like, God, there's no money in podcasting. I spend money
Not
to make a
yet.
podcast.
Yeah. Everyone
I,
thinks that. I mean, it took me like a year of my show before it ever made money, and I still pay my producer every month. So like it's going to be a
me
long
too.
time before it's like turned the other way. Like people, yeah, it's
Yeah.
I mean, but that's
So
the
it's like,
thing.
I'm
It's like,
spending money to do
yeah.
this.
Yeah. I mean, but you know what though? That's the assumption, right? Like that's the assumption piece
Yeah.
that everybody feels like you have to be a certain way in order to like have a certain experience. And at the end of the day, I think you just nailed it. Like, yes, staying true to yourself. And this is something I talk about on this show all the time. Like, staying true to you is not going to be the easiest option in the immediate. I think long term, bending your core values, departing from what you stand for, not being clear with what you stand for or who you stand for, right? Like that eventually is going to hurt you more long term. But in the immediate, it seems like the easier option to bend, right? To
It
bend, to
does.
pivot, to just, oh, well, like whatever, I'll just do it. Like it's not that big of a deal. But then all of a sudden, a lot of those, like, oh, well, it's not a big deals turn into like every single time. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, you look back and you don't even know who you are anymore because you've let the machine kind of mold you into who you are. So I think you really bring up a good point. And I know there's so like I know you out there. I know who listens to this show, and like y'all message me all the time and you say like, I don't know how you stay so you, like, because that's the thing about me. And probably like I have a coaching business. I'm an entrepreneurship coach, and like the thing I think the reason why my business does so well is not because like I'm some revolutionary coach that like says things that nobody else says. It's because whether you listen to my podcast, whether you follow me on social media, whether you meet me in real life, whether I teach at Soul Cycle part-time every once in a while, like no matter where we interact, you're getting the same Danielle. Like I am me, I am me, I am me, I am me, and I'm not bending
Hmm.
that for anyone. But
I love that.
it's hard though. It's
It's
hard.
so hard. I mean, I have had plenty of conversations with friends and family the last few months where they're telling me like basically asking me to break my character. And I haven't done it. And believe me, the temptation's there, but
Mm-hmm.
it's you can't, because once you do that, you do lose yourself. And if you
Mm-hmm.
lose yourself, it's hard to get yourself
Mm-hmm.
back. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot of work, and a lot of times you have to start over, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, long term, I think you're right. Long term, it pays off. Having integrity in the moment, or having, you know, putting your values first
Mm-hmm.
in the moment, it's very difficult. It's not easy. And
No.
I'm glad to hear that you're so confident in doing it too, because I don't even think a lot of people understand what their core values are. I don't even think they have them. They don't know
Yeah.
how.
Yeah. How did you figure out what yours were? Like what were some of the things you did to like really solidify like, oh, this is actually what I stand for?
Yeah, it was really in like the mid 2010s where
Okay.
I was feeling lost career-wise, I was lost
Mhm.
um self-wise, I was lost relationship-wise. I was
Mhm.
like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know
Mhm.
anything really. I don't have anything figured out.
Right.
And it was around like 30 years old that I was like, okay, what are the things that I need to get control of internally so that I can figure it out and
Mhm.
figure out like what I want to do and who I want to be so that it is consistent and that I can sleep at night.
Mm.
And not have this, it's really inner peace, right? Like I didn't have
Yeah.
inner peace. I was, frustrated with all those things I mentioned. And so what I really started to do is first I did start therapy, which is, I still see her to this day. So, that was a big foundation of figuring out like, what are the relationships in my life? What are the good ones? What are the ones that I need to put boundaries on? What are the ones I need to change? And
Mhm.
at the core, like I figured out that the most important thing to me is basically like doing the golden rule, right? Like do unto others as you would have them do unto me.
Mhm.
And so I started with that because I always thought about that, in my mind, like don't do something you wouldn't want done to yourself. And so I figured out like that what that really is like just doing the right thing. And so if I tell myself I'm going to just do the right thing or do what I think is best, and I'm going to always just try the best that I can,
Mhm.
and I'm going to have the best intentions. Like I'm never going to go anything with bad intentions. I'm not going to hold grudges because I used to hold grudges and want to get revenge and get back at people. And so I just really figured out like basically through listing these things and writing them down as I would think about them. And I'm a writer, I like to write. So it comes easy to let these things flow. And
Mhm.
I just honed in and realized like of these, let's say 50 things that I've written down, the ones that are most important and the ones that are most duplicatable, I think that's how you
Mhm.
say that word,
Yeah.
are just doing the right thing, having integrity, and like staying true to myself, be
Yeah.
intentional.
Yeah.
And I fall back on that and there's slip ups. I'm not
Yeah, of
perfect,
course.
but yeah, but it's like if someone says something bad about me on the internet or talks behind my back or, misspeaks, like take a minute and I'm like, okay, the, this is not true. This is who you are.
Mhm.
Act and respond with this.
Mhm.
Be intentional, do the right thing. And so
Mhm.
it took me a long time. It's still a work in progress, but I just figured out that like if I stay true to myself, I have a lot less regret. I have a lot less resentment. Um, I
Yeah.
don't, I don't really hold grudges anymore. I don't resent people. I kind of, take the approach of I can only control how I react and how I do things. And I'm going to do that with integrity.
Mhm. And I think I always just assume that people have like one thing I always say to myself, like if I feel like somebody is again like talking shit or like saying something that
Mm-hmm.
isn't true, I'm always like, okay, I really do believe that every single person is doing the best they can with the resources they have.
So do I.
And resources are different. Like we talked about at the beginning, like you could be from here and have different resources than somebody who lives over here, and that's not good, bad, it's just different. And
Circumstances.
yeah, and like the whole grudge thing, like same. I used to hold so many grudges. Like
Mm.
for what? Like all it did
Such a
was hurt
waste
me.
of energy.
It
Yeah.
hurt me. I like like radical forgiveness isn't for the people who have wronged you. It's for yourself. It's for yourself so
Mm-hmm.
that you can stay true to who you are and you can stay in your genius. That's ultimately what forgiveness is. It's like it's not for the other person. It's for you. I
Yes,
think
and
so
it's
many
it's
people
so
miss
you
that.
can. Yeah, you're completely right, and it's so you can move on.
Yeah.
And by the way, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You can
No.
forgive someone who has wronged you, and you don't ever have to speak to them again.
Right. That's the beauty of
And that's a
boundaries.
boundary. Yeah, exactly.
We love it with a
I will
capital
say
B.
like spell the whole thing in capital. The thing with boundaries is I used to also give a lot to my friends and family,
Oh,
but
same.
sometimes you need to stop and think of it as them taking,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you also
Mm-hmm.
have to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of
Mm-hmm.
yourself, no one else is going to.
Mm-hmm.
And putting up a boundary and saying, hey, like, it is not okay to do X, or if you continue to do Y, I'm going to do X. Like,
Yep.
that's personal protection
Yeah.
and personal um I forgot, lost the word I was going to look for. Preservation. It's
Yeah.
personal preservation. And
Yeah.
that's what you have to do, so that when you do give to others, you still have enough within yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we live in a society that conditions us. I mean, and you grew up in the Catholic Church, so like you were conditioned from a very young age, like do more for others than you ever do for yourself. And actually doing for yourself it's selfish and it's wrong and it's not
Mm-hmm.
okay. One thing that I've come to realize is that actually being selfish is the most selfless thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Is like if you're selfish with your time and you're selfish with your energy, then that's actually the most selfless thing you can do, because what you're doing is you're staying in your genius. And if you stay in your genius, then you actually get to do what you came here to do. And it's, I think that that's a really hard switch. And I think a lot of like, I mean, the whole thing with like being selfish and like, giving too much or being expected to give too much. I don't think it's that we have to like redefine selfishness, because people will say things like, oh, well, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. And I'm like, well, no, actually, like if you look it up in the dictionary, like that's actually the
That's the
definition of
definition.
selfish.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to do is we need to reframe what selfish actually is, because all selfishness is, I mean, that's the biggest threat, right? To this thing that you and I have been talking about of like, everybody has to have a place and a boundary and a thing and this. And like, if you're not this and you don't fit into this box that I put you in because I would be more comfortable if you stayed there, then all hell's going to break loose. And it's like, the biggest threat to that is selfishness, is uniqueness, is doing what you need to do to preserve yourself so that you can be the best you can for other people. And so I mean, that's like one of the things I say most of the time is like, actually being selfish is the most selfless thing you can do. And, people don't like that, but oh,
No,
well,
it is. And
it's
I
my
think
show. I can
it's,
say what I want.
but I think you're right. That's the thing. It's because of the negative connotation that the
Mm-hmm.
word selfish has.
Yep.
That,
Yep.
and why does it have that?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I use this a lot because I saw it on a meme. But if your glass isn't full of water, you can't give water to anybody else.
100%.
So that goes exactly with what you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, it's what we're expected to do is just like, instead of filling up our cup and letting it like overflow into other people's
Mm-hmm.
cup, what we're expected to do is constantly like, this goes back to like changing your values or like bending or compromising what you stand for, pouring out little by little by little to everybody around you who needs it. But then you're just going to have an empty cup. So instead, why don't we just continue to fill up our own cup so that all of the overflow gets to spill into everyone else's? Like, that seems like a more abundant life to me. That
Yep.
sounds more fun, and if it's not fun, I don't
totally
want
agree.
it. Um,
That makes sense.
like if it's not a full body yes, like it's a no. Like it is a
Yeah.
no. Um, okay, so you're doing a podcast. You obviously like your DIY stuff. By the way, like you making your own toothpaste, I thought was brilliant. We also make our own toothpaste. So
Oh, you do? Okay.
yeah,
How do you make it?
like this pretty much the exact same ingredients you do. Like we use different essential oils, but yeah, I mean pretty much the exact same way that you do with like just around the house stuff, and it works really, really well.
I've been doing it forever. And
Yeah.
it's funny because even a couple dentists have been like, oh, that's not, I'm like, well, listen, every time I go to the dentist, they tell me to keep doing what I'm doing. And
Right.
by the
Or
way,
you're
I
like,
suck at flossing.
right, you're like, I got no cavities, bitch, so thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, so you're doing all this, you're doing this podcast. By the way, like I've listened to a couple episodes. Like at the end I want you to plug
Oh,
it.
thank you.
Everybody, you guys need to go, like everyone who listens to this, go listen to Nick's podcast, because you're right, you bring on guests that are thought-provoking. It's very thought-provoking material, and that's, I mean, everybody who listens to this show, that's what they come for, is thought-provoking stuff. So go listen to Nick's show.
I like to learn and think, and if I'm going to have this conversation, I might as well have it recorded so other people can learn and think too.
100%. Yeah.
I'm sure you do
Yeah.
the same thing.
And you do your DIY stuff, but like what else? Like I think one of the best things to come from obviously like a whirlwind adventure that you've been on, and like being dragged through the mud, not being dragged through the mud, like being put in all these different pressure cookers. There's a lot of opportunity for lesson that comes out of that. And obviously, you've had to leave a lot of money on the table to stay true to yourself, and you've had to like pass up opportunities to stay true to yourself. But ultimately, is it worth it? And B, like, what do you create from that? What's going to come of that, do you think?
Yeah. So I think, is it worth it? That's such a hard question people ask all the time. Or would you do it again? What I
Mm-hmm.
think is it's all TBD, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a switch is flipped and your life changes. It's really nothing you can prepare for. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter how much therapy I've done or how many. I mean, it really doesn't. And let me
You
tell
call
you,
your
like going,
therapist. You're like week 2 on the show. You're like, it's not working.
it, we did talk 2, 3 times a week sometimes while filming,
I'm
just
sure.
because I'm a slow processor in
Okay.
some instances where like I like to think things through before responding or reacting. And
Oh, so
so
getting on a show and getting engaged within a week was the obvious choice. That was the obvious
right,
choice.
right. Well, it kind of sucks talking about it now, but like that was so easy. That was the easiest part. The
Yeah.
easiest part
Was
was,
that?
yeah, it was, what you see, it was really mostly in the pods. Like that was really how easy it was. It was like day
Well, it goes
two or
back to
three. And
right. Well, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Like if you remove, that's why I say this show is brilliant, because if you remove all of those constructs, all
mm-hmm,
of those expectations, all of the things that the pressure cookers and like the way that
the
society,
distractions,
yes, the personality that society puts, and you get to truly just be like, yeah, like it's brilliant. It really, really is brilliant. So yeah,
well, I
I
remember
completely agree.
too, there were times in the pod, actually throughout the whole thing, all the way up until like after, where
Mm-hmm.
people from the show, like cast, would be like, "Are you nervous? Like proposal day, are you nervous?" I'm like, "No." Do you know why? Because I know she's going to say yes. Do you know
Right.
how I know she's going to say yes? Because we've already talked about it. Because we
Right.
were just being true, like we weren't playing games,
Right.
or figuring out how to
Right.
get to the next step.
Right.
And same with like people, not and people in my life being like, "Are you worried about your edit?" Well, no, because there's nothing that I did that I regret, because I don't
Right.
really do things that I regret very often,
Right.
because I think them through and I
Right.
make sure that I'm, unapologetically myself.
Right.
So if there's a bad edit to be had, I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Anyway,
like, yeah,
we
but
detoured. Now we're gonna
slight
come back to the
shortcut.
train. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, is it worth it? TBD. It's what you do with it, right? And so what I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to do, is foster this community of talking about complicated subjects, complicated matters that divide us, and then uncovering that onion and realizing that at the core is a human being in every single one of us. Doesn't
Mm.
mean we have to agree on everything. I disagree with a lot of people on a lot of things. And guess what? I still value them as a friend, family member, functioning human being. It's a part of our society. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to use my platform for that, because
Yeah.
that's how I think. That's how I am in my normal life. It's how I am with friends and family. And so I think if I can, create that space and help some people feel better, help some people find peace, help some people talk to someone that maybe they're having trouble talking to about politics, or sharing something about mental health, or sharing something
Mm-hmm.
about overall wellness, or, a lot of the um, health and fitness stuff in general that we talk about on the
Yeah.
podcast and in other areas of my life, it's all worth it. If there's one person that takes something away from any type of interaction with me, whether it's a post, whether it's in real life, whether it's on a podcast or listening to this, then it's worth it, because I think we all
Mm-hmm.
just need to help one another and realize we're all in this together.
I could not agree more. I wish And I used to say, I'm trying to stop saying this because I used to be like, I wish more people felt this way. But I really do feel like there are a lot more people out there that do feel this way, that just don't
Mhm.
feel safe enough to admit that they feel this way. And
Mhm.
I'm like, maybe, maybe you going on this show and like obviously getting a whole lot of exposure and like, your network grew, I'm assuming exponentially over the last couple of years. Like it's given you the opportunity to speak to more people. It's given you the opportunity to reach more people. And like, sure, will that trigger the hell out of some people? Yeah. But like, that's not your people, right? Like you're here for a reason, and the right people are always going to listen, right? Like I have this saying, it's like, and I think it's probably not my saying because I've heard it from somewhere, but like if it's a God shot, it doesn't miss, right? Like what's meant for you is
Right.
coming regardless. So, I think it's awesome. I mean, obviously what you've been through is not awesome. And like that, there's obviously heartbreak and there's all these things that you've had to go through in order to get to where you stand today. And there's a really beautiful kind of lesson that comes from that, and opportunity to really, to serve and to change some minds, or to at least expand some thinking, which I really do believe that's where we're headed as a collective anyway, right? Is we're
It's
not
that or destruction.
we're not here to stay like, oh, this is your box, this is your box, this is your box. This is like it's kind of off topic, but this is kind of something that, like, I was married to a man, and I got married when I was 20, and then I met my son's dad. We fell madly in love, and then him and I ended up not staying together. And like I had dated women, and then not met, but my fiance and I were best friends. And then she and I just like fell in love after my son's dad and I broke up. And the amount of people that were like, "Oh, so that's it. She's gay now." And I'm like, I don't, I,
Uh,
I just, I've never
those
needed a box.
labels.
I've never
Yeah.
needed a label. Like, I'm like, I like people, and I fall in love with people, and I fall in love with souls. And so I don't need, I guess if it feels more comfortable for you to put me in that box, like have at
Right.
it. But like I don't identify with that necessarily. And there's a lot of things that, like, I mean, even when it comes to like pronouns, like I don't identify. I don't need you to know if you want me to know your, absolutely, like I respect that and I'll take them. And like, but I just think that the farther we, or the more we try to push like everybody has a box, the more
Mhm.
destructive it gets. And it's like if we're all running a race and there's a finish line, and that finish line is collective, ascension, or like being able to expand your thinking, or if the goal is to progress, or if the goal is to evolve, whatever the goal is that we're all trying to hit. If we're all running a race, you could sprint, I could jog, this guy over here could hop on one leg, and like ideally all of that's okay because we're all moving forward. And I think where we've come as a society, and what's gotten really distracting, is like you have the guy on one leg yelling at everybody saying that that is the only way to get there, and then you have the guy that's sprinting yelling that that is the only way to get there, and then you have people in the middle like just looking right to left being like, well, I don't know what the fuck to do. But
Right.
all that's doing is distracting, and now we're not moving forward. So like
And now
that's
we've stopped and we're screaming at each other.
right. And that's not
Yeah.
that's not productive, that's not progressive, that's defeating the purpose of, I think, what we all want. Like we all, like, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to understand people better. I don't know anybody who doesn't want love and security and like happiness and safety. Like I don't know anybody who doesn't want those things.
Well, that's what I always say when I talk to people that, to your point earlier about politics and homelessness or something like that. It's like, hey, like we all want the same things. Let's start there. We all want food. We all want to
Mhm.
take care of our families. We
Mhm.
all want a place to live. And we
Mhm.
all want to take a vacation every once in a while. Like we
Mhm.
all want these things. So instead of screaming at each other, and I had someone on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said, like, if you stop and think, hey, you're doing brunch in the city and watching, football in the city, and then there's someone in the suburbs who's drinking a beer watching football, but hey, you're both watching football. You just like to do it in a different setting. Like
Right.
why is this person talking bad about that person talking bad about this person? It's okay, like, to just
Right.
have nuance, to do different
Right.
things, to
Right.
but
And
we
what works
all at the end
what
of the
works
day
in one
want basic human needs.
community, right? Exactly. And like what works in one community may not work in another community. And like that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just think too, I'm like the amount of time, and obviously I'm a coach, so I see this from like a bird's eye perspective where I'm like, the amount of time y'all waste trying to figure out what that guy's doing, and then you're wondering why your business and your life isn't successful, or like why you can't meet the person for you, or why you can't grow your business. Yeah. Like, it's because you are literally draining your life force energy worrying so much about what other people are doing. Like that drains your life force energy. And if you're drained, you cannot build something. You can't. It's impossible.
It is impossible. And that's another thing I think, and I'm guilty too. So I'm not always practicing what I preach here, but if you're spending your time worrying about other people and what other people are doing, you're not doing it right. Like you're not setting yourself up for success. Mm-mm. And another thing that I like to think about is you end up doing that a lot based on the people you surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. And I know this is, not my quote either, but I always say, like, I would like to be surrounded by people who want to talk about ideas, not other people. And I think that when you sit around and you talk about other people, that's what you think about when you're in your own time too. When I'm around and I'm talking to people about ideas or stuff, like I do on the podcast or like we're talking about here, like I'm going to leave here and think about that. Right. And that's going to lead me to think something I can do better, or something I've learned, or something I can share. Yeah. And that's the difference, in my opinion, of people who are centered and have their inner peace versus the people who are out there unsure who they are and worried about being like everybody else.
Well, and that's the reason why we outsource our energy onto others and what they're doing, and trying to get them to see us and understand us, because we're not comfortable with ourselves. And I've been there. I've been so uncomfortable with myself, or like so like just irritable, or like not feeling like I'm enough or worthy. And so I'm constantly picking at everything else, or everyone around me, or I'm trying to get other people to see it from my perspective. And I've actually, like, the more that I've really grounded down and really just fallen in love with who I am and what I stand for, I'm more polarizing, because I can have any, like you said, I can have a conversation with anyone.
Unapologetically yourself.
Yeah, like I can have a conversation with anyone, and like you're probably not going to change my mind. Like maybe a little. Like I like to learn and I like to expand my thinking, but like I know who I am, and like at the end of the day, that's not going to change no matter who I'm friends with. And the more that I've done that, like I feel like the more polarizing you become, actually, the more inclusive you become, because then it's like you just make room for other people because you're so
cast a broad net.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that.
I just think that these conversations need to be happening like on every show all the time, because we're not like Danielle McCleary and Nick Thompson are not the only ones thinking about this. Like, as much as I like to pretend that I trend set everything, I don't. And like,
well, I've been saying this a lot. I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but I'm like, I'm not really, and like, people ask me for relationship advice. They ask me for like self-care advice, all this. I'm like, I can tell you what I do that works for me. And I can tell you like the structure that I put in place. And that doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but like, it's like, I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm just sharing what I learn along the way.
Well, it's because you have your personal experiences, which is what people ultimately want to know, is like, do you know your human design, by the way? Have you ever looked up your human design?
No, I don't even know what that is.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole other podcast episode for a whole other day. But there's a thing, it's called human design. I would be so curious to know what yours is, because it's kind of like helps you like figure out like how you're meant to function and like how you're meant to be productive. It's kind of like falls in line with like astrology, but like also a little bit of Enneagram, quantum physics type thinking. So it pulls from both sides. It's just really fascinating to learn that about yourself. But yeah, I think like ultimately people follow people who have experiences because of their experiences, not because of their knowledge. It's like the people that I really relate to the most are not the people that necessarily know the most, but they're the people that have experienced enough and have stayed true to who they are through those experiences. So in that light, I absolutely commend you, because what you've been through just in general, like as a human, going from like being, a normal person to all of a sudden the world's eyes are on you. That's a huge culture shock. That's a huge mind fuck. And, you seem like through a screen, you seem like you're, you're doing the things, and you're learning the things, and you're sharing as you go, which isn't easy. And it's also really commendable. So I really do commend you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And even from our brief email exchange last week, I was like, oh, this is my people. So
Funny how
I
that
feel the
works.
same way. Yeah. Isn't it funny? But yeah,
Universe knows.
you're exactly right. I think that, everyone can learn something from somebody else, but it's also your duty as a functioning member of society and as a human being, I think, to share your experiences and learnings, because if someone else sees you doing it and can relate to it, they're going to do it. And that's how we all learn and help one another.
Yeah. Well, tell us how we can find you. I mean, obviously you have Instagram, but tell us about your show. Tell us about all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram. It's nthompson513. You can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube, it's called Conversations with Nick Thompson. We talk about mental health, stigmas, overall health and wellness, news and politics. Anything you think of that may have a stigma or divide people with is open to be a topic on that show. So I hope you check it out. We have all sorts of different types of experts, and I don't even know if they're all experts, but people with different experiences sharing that and building human connection.
I love it. Yeah, it's a great show. I've listened to a couple episodes, and
I appreciate that.
I think it's thought provoking, and it makes me think. And if I'm thinking, then I'm growing. So I appreciate you, and I have a feeling this is probably not the last time that we're going to talk. I feel like this is a conversation that we could probably like expand on quarterly. Like, how are we doing? Like,
I know,
let's
right?
evolve.
Let's do a quarterly check-in.
Let's do a quarterly check-in. How are you doing? But thank you for just like time is such a gift, and the fact that you've given me an hour of yours, and all of us who listen to this show, an hour of your time is just so valuable and precious. And I just can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll talk soon.